Thank you very much, Marco. Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Okay. I wish first to express my deep regret for being unable to be in Brussels physically with you today. The reason has been mentioned, the situation following the very severe earthquake which hit the region of Emilia-Romagna, and I'm very grateful to the European Commission for their expression of sadness and sympathy, which were conveyed to me by President Barroso a few days ago and reiterated today by Vice President Rehn and by yourself, Marco. I am very appreciative of this. I would like, first of all, to congratulate the Commission and in particular Vice President Olli Rehn for having organized this Brussels Economic Forum. And I'm grateful for the invitation to me. I've been, I think, a regular participant to the Brussels Economic Fora, and I've been able to measure through the years the intellectual and policy impact that this big venture of DG ECFIN has been producing. Thank you, Marco, for your introductory words, and indeed it is an honor for me to hold this second Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa lecture following last year's inaugural lecture delivered by Federal Finance Minister Wolfgang Schäuble. I first met Tommaso in 1962 when we both were students at Bocconi University in Milan. I saw him for the last time on November 13, 2010 in Paris at the Comité d'Orientation of Notre Europe. And I will make a brief reference to that occasion in a moment. Between those two dates, I had the privilege of a frequent dialogue with Tommaso, sometimes in the form of close cooperation, often in common fights conducted in the name of a vision, be it about Italy or Europe, or Italy's role in Europe, which was usually the same between the two of us, although on many occasions it definitely tended to be a minority view relative to the ongoing debates of the time. And in particular, I would like to stress three institutions that have marked at the same time Tommaso's life and my own life. As you mentioned, Marco, the alma mater Bocconi University, but also the European Commission itself, where well before Tommaso came in as Director General of DG2, as it was called at the time, I had been as a stagiaire in 1964-65 precisely at DG2. And then, of course, he was there when I was not there, and then more recently when I was European Commissioner, we had many exchanges on the life of the Commission and its role of impulsion in the development of the European Union. And then the third institution where I didn't realize at the moment of Tommaso's passing away that it would be a further element of commonality between him and me. Well, that is obviously the Italian government, where I now hold the position that was his, that of Minister of Economy and Finance, a position that he discharged with great talent, integrity, and success in spite of the very difficult conditions. What I will do is to try to vividly remember Tommaso's thinking and policy legacy by going through the topic of this Brussels Economic Forum, sources of growth, revisiting growth models in the EU. Obviously, I'm not going to give any systematic treatment of this huge topic, but I would like to pick and choose, in a sense, some points that I believe to be critical issues now for current policies, and which at the same time were aspects of Tommaso's thinking, policy recommendations, or indeed even direct policy action at the European Commission or the ECB or in the Italian government. Well, sources of growth in the EU. Tommaso was among the first ones to recognize the huge potential role of the European single market as a source of growth. And I remember that we had many highly productive, for me, exchanges with Tommaso in 2009, 2010, when I was working on a report commissioned by President Barroso on how to best relaunch the single market as a factor of integration, but also as a factor of growth. And Tommaso not only had a masterly knowledge of the philosophy, but also of the details of European integration, including the single market. But I remember in particular some conversations where we were really on the same wavelength in stressing the double need for an effective single market. That is the market component, but also the public powers component. In particular, the need, of course, to proceed as deep as possible in the dissolution phase of removing all possible existing obstacles in order to create a real, deep single market, well-functioning, but also the other element of the realization that just as at the national level one cannot have a good functioning market without a strong role for public powers, similarly, one cannot have a well-functioning European single market without a strong role for public powers. And this indeed has been recognized since day one, or even day 0, March 1957, the Treaty of Rome, or even before the Treaty of Paris, when it was clearly established since the beginning that the integrating Europe would have to have an authority to enforce competition rules. And that was, of course, the authority of the coal and steel community, and then the European Commission as competition authority. So public policy intertwined with the development of market forces. Less recognized, but I believe increasingly important, is another element of public powers that is really needed for us to have a well-functioning market, be it at the national or at the EU level. That is the role of public powers as providers of public goods. And and a lot remains to be done for us to have at the EU level the same degree of provision of public goods that make the working of the market possible and efficient that we have at the national level. And I believe that now that it is officially recognized that the further development of the single market is one and maybe the key factor for European growth, then we should also devote increasing political attention, as the European Commission is doing indeed, to aspects such as the financial framework for the EU, or the setting up of a physical single market alongside the legal single market, which means in particular the interconnections of the networks that provide physical life and blood to the single market. So we cannot be content of advancing in the legal construction of the single market. We need to do much more, and I think ultimately the advocates of the single market, which are at the same time advocates of very sharp restrictions on the financing of the EU, will come to realize that they are slightly contradictory in their positions, because they risk undermining the development of their own objective, the single market, because of incoherent treatment of the need for the single market to provide public goods for the European economy. For public powers to provide public goods that are necessary complements of the single market. And here I would like to underline another aspect of Tommaso's thinking, which I also happen to believe to be very important. It has again to do with the single market, but touches upon a broader and more political aspect of European integration, namely the link between the market and the social in the construction of a highly competitive social market economy, as the Lisbon Treaty indeed mandates us all to achieve. We have, and I think this, if I may, Oli and Marco, make a modest suggestion, now that following the productive, although not yet conclusive, European Council, the informal council of the 23rd of March, it has been decided that a group composed of President Van Rompuy, President Barroso, President Juncker and President Draghi will work on a longer-term vision of European integration, which should give more coherence and solidity to the EMU, to Economic and Monetary Union, and they will make a first progress report at the next European Council. Well, I think that there is one topic there that to me cannot really be eluded if we want to see the conditions for the development of a genuine economic union, unobstructed by economic nationalism over the next 5, 10, 20 years. That is precisely the connection between the social and the market aspects of the social market economy, very concretely, as I submitted in the report to President Barroso, there are countries, broadly simplifying, the largest countries of continental Europe, the key economies in the Eurozone, that tend to have more sympathy for an intensive social economy, of course, with the market, but with some degree of caution on integration, liberalization, particularly in the sphere of services of general economic interest, of network industries, and so on. And there is another group of countries, again to simplify, like the UK or Poland or many of the new member states, and the Scandinavian countries, the Nordic countries, which give a lot of prominence to the market, competition, openness aspects, a bit less so to the social, as we know. I believe, as Tommaso and his friend and inspirer Jacques Delors do, that we need to seek a new fundamental compromise between the forces for market integration springing mainly out of this second group of countries, with the forces of political integration springing mostly out of the first group of countries like Germany, France, Italy, and others. And I think that this means very concretely in policy terms to make bolder and decisive progress on the single market, which will be loved by the second group of countries, the market lovers, but will be resisted somewhat by the more social oriented continental economies. But in exchange, there should be a minimum of tax coordination, and I think the Commission is on the right way there with the efforts of Commissioner Šemeta, and some not necessarily social harmonization. I think that is impossible and unnecessary, but at least the removal of those aspects of the pure development of the single market, which can give some more socially oriented European economies like France, to mention the most notable example, the easy objection that we may be prepared to more market integration, but only if this is not and is not seen by the public opinion to come with a disruption to the social elements of the fabric of a country. So I believe this may not seem a technical issue. Indeed, it is not only a technical issue, but I believe that without taking this topic head on, namely how to reconcile the social and the market in a new impulsion towards an integrated social market economy in Europe, we will not achieve a fully convincing single market, and we will not achieve the powerful source of growth that may come. And therefore I do urge, if I may, the four leaders in the group to consider the future of EMU, to devote proper attention to this aspect. Another point which is at the core of Tommaso's work on European integration is of course financial integration and the need for for more integrated financial regulation and supervision. And here I would like to briefly hint at this topic from the subjective point of view of a country which was Tommaso's country as well as mine and yours, Marco. Of course, our country is Europe, but we still are intellectually linked to specific experiences, and that is Italy. Now, take the case of Italy just as an example. The two issues of limiting contagion and of stimulating growth, which may appear generic and indeed in need of progresses but not vital, are vital for many countries. And let's take, as I said, the case of Italy. I am encouraged to have this conversation today rather than the day before yesterday, because given the hugely interesting set of documents issued yesterday by the European Commission, in particular its communication to the European Parliament and Council on not only the action for stability, growth and jobs, but also on the country-specific recommendations, I dare to say that Italy comes out with a fairly positive assessment by the European Commission, especially as regards not the macroeconomic imbalances which are there, which are serious, which are the results of years and years of imbalances and will take some time to be remedied, but in terms of the assessment on ongoing policies, both as regards budgetary consolidation and the needed structural reforms. Well, I am relieved and indeed encouraged by what the Commission has to say on what Italy did, and of course I perfectly realize that we are far from the position of being even remotely complacent. Still much more remains to be done, but just consider a country that achieves a deficit, a nominal deficit to GDP ratio this year of 2%, which compares with a 3.6% deficit to GDP for the whole European Union, and which is heading firmly, as Olli Rehn confirmed yesterday, towards a modest structural surplus next year, 2013, whereas the whole of the EU is expected to have a structural deficit of 2.2 next year. I'm referring to the spring forecasts of the European Commission. Now, it's obviously a difficult place to be in when you have a country which is displaying this massive and concentrated in time effort of consolidation and of structural reforms, which is obviously politically costly and socially costly, but needed, and sees its position still threatened by huge possibilities of contagion. when this government was born in November last year, the spread of 10-year Treasury bonds versus the 10-year Bund was 574 basis points. It came down to a minimum of about 250, 260, so it was halved. And then in recent months and weeks, it went back to the area of 460 or so basis points in recent days. So clearly the spread as an indicator of contagion is there. Because of the overall weakness of the system more than for any specific weakness of a country, which of course has a high debt to GDP ratio and is working towards decumulating that high ratio, but is doing the right things, at least we have been told by the Commission, in terms of current policies. This is not only a channel of contagion, but is actually a powerful policy disincentive. I know that there is a running argument that unless the markets put pressure through high interest rates on governments will not find the determination to do the painful consolidation and structural reforms. It may also be the opposite, honestly, because a government, especially if it is a very atypical government like the current Italian government, which does not have the prospect of facing the electorate, because it will disappear once the Parliament is over in next spring, well, that government can afford, and indeed we can afford, the unpopularity, because we are not here to pay a political price for that. But we have to be mindful about the sustainability of fiscal discipline and of the reform processes. And the more months go by with the Italian society submitted to this very strong and intensive consolidation and reform effort, and without seeing virtually any benefit or any objective indication other than the much welcomed words of the European Commission, but no objective indication from the markets that this is an effort worth doing. Well, what are we achieving? We are achieving the consequence that month after month the uninformed as well as the highly informed public opinion in this country are turning against the European recommendations for discipline and structural reforms, although we take particular care in never once arguing with the Italian public opinion that we have to do these things because Brussels wants us to do them. As a devoted European, as Tommaso was, I have never once used that way of presenting the needed reforms in Italy. But it is obvious that there is going to be sooner or later, and equally in other countries, a backlash against the very fiscal and structural discipline that we are imposing to this country for its own interest and not because Europe accelerate the efforts, as the European Commission is doing, in order to limit the contagion not simply because a huge financial contagion and crisis would be a frightful event, but even more because this would dismantle the support for sustainable fiscal discipline. And I believe that countries that are at the core of the system and which have had the huge merit of instilling the culture of stability to the EU in the first place, most notably Germany, should really reflect deeply but quickly on these aspects. Their own best product for export, which we are very grateful to the Germans for having invented and promoted the culture of stability, risks being undermined because of lack of promptness in setting up the necessary instruments to limit the contagion. And I think what is now being studied in terms of possible direct bank recapitalization, not necessarily through the states, by the EFSF, or on the European backstop to bank guarantees, or the effective resolution framework to mitigate bank bailouts that the European Commission is about to present. All this, I think, acquires a special importance, particularly in the light of sticking to the discipline and reformist efforts. And all of this, of course, in Tommaso's thinking, has to be inscribed in the outlook for a clearer single supervision of banks and of financial institutions, at least the large ones in the European Union. He was considered as a prophet slightly out of time and realism when not many years ago he was pleading for such a thing at the ECOFIN councils in 2006, 2008, 2007 and 8, and of course he was unfortunately perfectly right. Let me conclude, Oli, Marco, ladies and gentlemen, with a few words on growth, and you will have perceived probably that I see really a continuum between the efforts to limit contagion and the efforts to stimulate growth, because I am not of the view held by many in Europe today, namely, okay, we need a package to stimulate growth, but that will not have effects before the medium to long term. I do not agree. Why? We should ask the question, why is the spread for a country like Italy, which is recognized to be doing the right policies, still so high? Well, I think there are two underlying reasons there. One is indeed the level of the debt to GDP ratio, which admittedly is the result of, let me put it in self-flagellatory terms, the result of the sins of the past. But I think the other important reason for the high spread is the lack, for some time at least, of a visible trajectory of growth. In fact, I think one of the analytical developments of the last year or so, which is most interesting, has been the increasing role given by the markets, by the newsletters of the investment banks, by the rating agencies, that is, by people versed in the very short term, the greater role they attach to the prospects for growth in coming to their assessments. And increasingly, we see that also in the rating of a country, the presence or absence of a clear trajectory for growth plays a big role. Now, the budgetary consolidation efforts plus the structural reform, of course, put in place the conditions for growth. Conditions for growth to be sustainable, the budgetary discipline, and condition for growth to appear at a certain point. The structural reforms meant to increase the competitiveness, ultimately, of a country. But if demand is not out there, it's difficult to achieve some growth. And of course, a country engaging in the policy mix that Italy is destroys demand rather than creating demand. If say, at the end of June, the European Council comes up with a credible, sizable package for growth, then rather promptly, I believe, the markets will perceive that there is out there a perspective for growth. And this will reflect, I believe, almost instantly in some attenuation of the spread for a country like mine, because the lack of growth component of the high spread, at least that component, will subside a bit. That is why I see a continuum between limiting contagion and working on growth. How to work on growth? I think that at the May 23rd European Council, which was not brilliant in terms of projecting conclusions because it was an informal council, but I think a very serious work has been done in sorting out what are the views of the different heads of governments on growth. And I wish in particular to retain two or three points which impressed me as coming out rather clearly from the discussion. And one is indeed the greater role given by everybody, I would say, to investment, including public investment. And here again we go back to Tommaso, because on the last occasion when I saw him, I mentioned the Comité d'Orientation of Notre Europe in November 2010. That was 1 month before he passed away. He strongly underlined in his concluding remarks the need for a EU growth policy, not just the coordination of national growth policies done by the EU. And in that conversation, a very rich debate was then generated by Tommaso's intervention on the role of investment. I think that investment is still an under-recognized component of European policies. Of course, the growing role of public-private partnerships has to be fully praised. At the same time, I continue to believe, as I first underlined as a member of the Commission in 96-97, when the Commission actually manufactured the first Stability and Growth Pact, that the approach adopted did not recognize to a sufficient extent the nature of the expenditures, whereas the sector which makes the expenditure received perhaps an exaggerated attention. Thus, in the original Stability and Growth Pact, but even in the Maastricht Treaty before it, the source of evil was really the public sector. So any spending made by the public sector, be it current expenditure, be it for investment, was suspect and needed to be kept in terms of deficit generation, whereas any expenditure made by the private sector was not suspect, irrespective of whether it was private investment, private consumption, or even private consumption financed through consumer indebtedness, mortgages, etc. No surprise then if we would have seen for years considerable discipline put on budgetary developments of member states, which was good, and a total lack of surveillance or even attention paid to the dynamics of private sector expenditure and private sector indebtedness. It was not an occurrence which should have come by surprise. What happened in different modalities in Spain or Ireland is almost the mechanical extrapolation of a control system that was really biased. By the way, I think that this asymmetry that we had in the Maastricht Treaty and in the Stability and Growth Pact is not really in line with another and earlier key pillar of European integration. If we look at the former Article 295 of the treaty, sorry, I still use numbers before the Lisbon Treaty, Article 295, it stipulates, the article is still there of course, it stipulates the total neutrality of the EU as regards private or public ownership of companies, but imposes on both privately or publicly held companies the obligation to comply with competition and state aid rules. It is only when it comes to creating the single currency that is many years later, when it comes to protecting ourselves from the excesses of the public sector, because historically that had indeed been the main ultimate source of monetary and financial instability in many countries, that a grossly approximated analytical scheme was to acquire unique political relevance. This means that Europe is inflicting upon itself an anti-growth bias. It is perfectly correct not to pursue growth through the illusions of inflation-creating policies or budget deficits. But I must say, I've always seen the merits of putting a very sharp cap on government deficits due to current expenditure, but allow for greater room for public sector investment expenditure. I know perfectly well that it is very hard in practice to define what investment is, but honestly I maintain that had we started in 96-97 to put at work the Commission, Eurostat and the competent services of the Member States with a view to arrive at an agreed and even extremely stringent definition of what is a worthy public investment, we would now be in a position to apply a policy apparatus that, while protecting Europe and the euro from fiscal profligacy, would do so without penalizing the growth of Europe. Thus, ultimately, the ability of many member states to comply in a sustainable way with the ceilings on deficits and debt as a proportion of their GDP. So, and then I do not need to add that in good economic literature and constitutional tradition, the golden rule is certainly not what today goes under the nickname of Golden Rule, that is the Schuldenbremse introduced only in 2009 in the German federal constitution and now properly through the European process into the national constitutions. It's certainly better than nothing, but I think we all remember that Article 110 of Germany's Grundgesetz, or constitution, stipulated in 1949 that, I quote, "the budget shall be balanced with respect to revenues and expenditures," and, end quote. And Article 115 stated that, I quote, "revenue obtained by borrowing shall not exceed the total of investment expenditures provided for in the budget." So what a pity that Europe, although had considered it in the negotiations for Maastricht, did not decide to go the full way to embrace the German constitutional rule of that time. But, to make a long story short, I think it is positive that the six-pack expands the role for analysis of the quality of public expenditure, and I very much welcome what the Commission had to say in its report yesterday, and I really congratulate you, Olli, on this, and I can only encourage you to persist in this direction, where it says, apart from the recently proposed two-pack, there is no immediate need to change the recently agreed rules. The existing rules provide scope for judgment and for differentiation between member states according to their fiscal space and macroeconomic conditions, while ensuring long-term sustainability of public finances. Central to the implementation of the rules is the assessment of the budgetary measures taken by the member states, in particular in structural terms. The Commission will monitor the impact of tight budget constraints on growth-enhancing public expenditure and on public investment. If necessary, it will give guidance on the scope for possible action within the boundaries of the EU and national fiscal frameworks. In the coming months, it will issue a report on the quality of public spending, which will deal with these issues. This is something my government and I personally welcome very, very much. The very last note is on an instrument for growth that I prefer not to see introduced in the European landscape. There has been recently a revived debate on whether the mandate of the European Central Bank should be expanded to include an explicit reference to growth, as is the case for the Federal Reserve System. I have a different view. Maybe I'm too German, but I believe that the ECB has been really extraordinary in acquiring in a few years a very excellent reputation. It's not easy for a new institution to build almost instantly a very good reputation, especially in difficult conditions. And I think the mandate has not precluded the ECB, although sticking fully to it, from devising new modalities of intervention, as we have seen in the last few months of last year and at the beginning of this year. Why, although I firmly urge the EU to put growth more at the center of its overall policy framework, why I do not think there is a need for growth to be included in the mandate of the ECB. Well, mainly because, and of course these are topics on which Tommaso was an intellectual leader, because I think there would be the risk that if we had growth enshrined as one of the objectives of the ECB, we, the governments of European member states, would find that more comfortable, and we would refrain from taking the politically costly necessary measures to achieve more growth from the front where it needs to be achieved. That is the structural reforms, that is a coordinated policy for investments, and so on. So the needed interventions at the national level and at the EU level, which are in the hands of national governments and of the European institutions, would be even less likely than they have proved to be over the past, if there could be the alibi that, well, after all, the ECB has the mandate of growth, has an unlimited ability to create a pretty precious material for growth, many would believe, that is money. Why should we painfully work on growth in other more direct and real ways? So I do not see a need, and I would even see some counterproductive effects if there were to be this broadening. But at the same time, I must say that there are aspects of the present mandate in the treaty to which I am sure personally the ECB would be sensitive. For example, the integrity of the euro area. It's not written, and I think it would be strange for any constitution which mentions monetary stability and the central bank to say explicitly that the central bank should also act to avoid the disappearance, disintegration, the death, the evaporation of the national currency. So I believe that the ECB should consider within the realm of its responsibilities, and I'm sure it does, the integrity of the euro and of the euro area. And equally, as Vice President Olli Rehn mentioned earlier this morning, to ensure financial stability. And probably, I'm not sure about this, but probably the objective of ensuring financial stability, as well as the objective which is internal to the pure monetary policy function of the ECB, the objective of ensuring the integrity and the functioning of the transmission mechanism of monetary policy could be put into question if the spreads between various countries become, as they have become recently, and so largely disconnected from the real developments of the policy making in the different countries. So I have once again found reflection on Tommaso's life and Tommaso's work very inspiring. There is also, of course, there is always a risk of overstretching a personality of reference when you try to refer to current issues in the light of his or her thinking, but I think that Tommaso was so prophetical, so deep, and so wide at the same time in his thinking about Europe, EU policies and national policies, that the using of his thinking as a fil rouge in which I've indulged today hopefully is not entirely arbitrary. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mario. Thank you very much indeed. It was not a rhetorical lecture, but I think you have peppered it also with a number of policy suggestions that call us to reflect further and to prepare work in view of the next rendezvous, and in particular the end of June European Council, and we hope very much to be à la hauteur. We have not foreseen question time now, but I would like, if you so allow, to give the floor to Vice President Rehn for a few final words before we break for coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Mario. Warmly, many thanks for your very insightful reflections and candid messages, which were carried by your very personal engagement in both the future of Italy and Europe, which we could feel it here, which you could also hopefully feel there, thanks to the almost standing ovation in this hall. And you carried also your messages with your, I dare to say, your normal witty and astute style, but nevertheless non-offensive approach, which usually weakens the resistance to your ideas and initiatives. I can tell you that we discussed many of the matters you referred to in the college yesterday, in the College of Commissioners, issues related to growth and investment, and we very much agree with your ideas and proposals. I'm very glad that the new political landscape in Europe is giving a energized boost for some proposals that have been tabled already some time ago, such as increased investment through an EIB capital increase or project bonds for investment. These are very important matters in the run-up to the June European Council. And I take due note of your reflections in this regard by saying that it is very important that we look beyond the immediate horizon. We work for a longer-term perspective on the economic and monetary union, and we need to map out the next main steps towards a full economic and monetary union, demonstrating the political commitment of member states to the long-term perspective of the euro will be very important also for restoring confidence in the euro area, even in the short term. And this should include discussions on what kind of a roadmap we need for some form of joint issuance of debt and conditions for that in the form of further enforcement of economic governance, as well as mapping out building blocks towards a banking union, including an integrated financial supervision and a single deposit guarantee scheme. And finally, this will require a wide-ranging process that will take into account all the legal issues, and it has to include a political process to give democratic legitimacy and accountability to further moves of economic and political integration, which was very much at the heart of Tommaso Padoa-Schioppa's work. So, thank you very much, Mario. We wish best to Italy and to you, and for Europe, of course. And with these words, I want to release the participants for the coffee break. Thank you.
Thank you very much.